It's good to go back to basics in difficult times in particular. It's good to go back to basics anyway. I think we speak a lot about our principle stack, and 0 to 1, Peter Thiel is one of the books that underlines our principle stack. And I want to discuss this book today. I've done extensive chapter discussions, summaries of the book and all that, but I think today is a good day to just revisit why Peter Thiel is part of our principle stack, the way we think about investing, in particular about one fundamental concept that he is trying to explain in this book. And the concept is very simple. It's about the end game. And the end game for a company that creates wealth is a company that then can sustain its share of profits that it creates while creating lots of value for the world. Thiel in particular talks about the X and the Y. The X is the value you create for the world. There's no other way to generate wealth, at least in this system that we have today. And I think going forward, we are way past times when rent-seeking and monopolies and all that stuff and corruption and wars and things like that, they just don't help you create wealth. You can do it, but you don't generate wealth. So we believe in a world where you can only create wealth by really creating X, which is value for the rest of the world. And then you have to have Y, which is the share of the profits that you get from X. And Thiel talks about this in one of his lectures. He talks about this, of course, in his book. And I want to talk about this today in this episode. This is Not Even Wrong podcast. It's June 10th, 2022. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is down 3%. The market's down 2.5%. For the year, we're down 45%. The market's down 18%. We're underperforming by 27%. So I think these numbers explain why I think this is a good time to revisit our basics instead of getting lost in the news. The news today is the CPI, the index, which is higher than expected. Inflation is high. The Fed will have to raise rates. In other words, we need a slowdown in the economy to stop inflation. So this is the news. Markets are selling off. People are scared. People are insecure. We don't know exactly where this is going. There's value created here, value destroyed there, but overall we're definitely in a downward spiral. Lots of people are warning, Wall Street, everybody is concerned. So this is kind of the situation we're in. And I don't want to discuss this any further because I don't have much to offer here. But what I can offer is for us to understand why we're in this business and how we're trying to achieve our goals. The purpose of Orange Capital Partners is to generate wealth by investing in fundamental new concepts and engineering practices with large impact. And I want to talk about Peter Thiel because he's part of our principle stack. And the reason I think he's so crucial is because he really talks about the one thing that we often neglect. And it's one of those things that is so obvious. And that is, well, how much of the value you create as a company do you actually capture? How much is left for you and your shareholders? Because that's what we really get. We don't get to celebrate companies that make money or do good things or save the planet. We just can't make money with that unless the company is also able to get a share of that profit. This is the key. And I think this is already the message that Thiel is trying to provide, which is, listen, you can do all kinds of things. I mean, yes, you have to do good things. Tesla has to be able to make a better car at lower cost in order to provide value to society. If Tesla just wants to take market share away from existing car manufacturers or market share away from Apple or something like that, then that's not good enough. If competition is killing profits, then it doesn't matter how valuable they are for society. So let's take Tesla. This is our largest position, okay? And this is what really most of our thinking is about. There's some of it also with the biotech companies, but since their position has reduced quite a bit, we're really focused on Tesla. So the fundamental situation here is the following. So we have a company which is doing good things that we believe are good. They have an electric car. The reason the electric car is better than the ICE car is because it gives us more optionality. We can choose the source of fuel that we use for transportation. We can make it greener. We don't have to. We can use coal, but we can. Whereas with fossil fuels, we don't have a choice. We can also have a better engine. It's less loud. It's more powerful. And then we have the software-defined car, which is another layer of innovation. It's just more convenient, it's more fun, it's more safe. We have full self-driving, which is, of course, huge saving in time and effort and all that, and also safer. And then we have solar, which is capturing energy for the household, giving consumers more flexibility relative to their utilities. And this is the realm in which Tesla is playing right now. And all of that is good. Now, the question is, how much can they actually capture? This is the big question. In other words, well, if you create a $1 trillion industry, well, can you get something? Can you get a few trillions of market value from that $1 trillion industry that you're creating? This is the question. So the Y, which is the percent of the value created that you capture for your shareholders, how big is that? So this is the fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves as investors in any company, in particular now with Tesla. What's the end game here? Now, Thiel is pretty provocative. So he talks about the necessity to be a monopoly. He says that companies never say that they're monopolies when they're monopolies, and they always talk about being a monopoly when they're not monopolies. There's some truth to that. If we follow that line of thinking, of course, with Tesla has never stated in any which way that they are a monopoly. But of course, they are a monopoly because they created the market for electric luxury cars. That was a market, a small market that didn't exist before, and they created it. So they were able to penetrate that market with almost 100% market share. Even today, I would say the market share for electric luxury cars, Tesla has probably 90% market share or 95%. So they own that market. What they're doing now is they're penetrating further into the rest of the car market. In other words, not electric luxury cars. But if you really look at it, I would say there's still, even a Model 3 is actually a luxury car relative to what we had before. So any kind of car before Tesla, so before 2012, before the Model S was launched, any car of the value that you get as a customer with a Model 3, any car like that would have been considered a luxury and cost $50,000 plus. Now it costs actually $50,000 plus today because of the inflation, but then inflation adjusted, whatever, that car would have been more $70,000, $80,000. So in other words, we're getting a better value now, but most fundamentally, I think Tesla still owns the market for electric luxury cars. In fact, Tesla is now defining luxury because it's adding software to the car. And we've seen that very well displayed this week at the Worldwide Developer Conference of Apple when they introduced CarPlay, which is really in many ways a copy of the Tesla user interface. Now, this leads me to the next point, which is, well, okay, Thiel is very adamant about competition. So are we now in a situation where Tesla is actually going to suffer because of competition? Is Apple going to be able to eat into the pie of Tesla? In other words, are we here in a destructive, competitive world now? And if that's the case, then Tesla should be a 20 times PE stock, growing at 50% maybe, but 20 times PE, and not the 80 or something that they have right now, which would still be a decline of, well, you can do the math here. So, and the answer is, of course, as investors, we believe that that's not the case. And the reason we believe that's not the case is because we have ample evidence that fully integrated software development with hardware in any kind of device, which is larger than as large an iPhone, larger, is key. And I think that's the lesson that, of course, Apple has learned better than anybody else because they've succeeded in making phones like that. We believe that the same will apply to cars, even more extreme, particularly when you want to integrate self-driving and the software interface with the car and the safety interface and the full self-drive and all these things. When they start all playing together, it's almost impossible to believe that somebody can just do one piece of the pie and the rest is done by others. In other words, we don't have that horizontal differentiation in the supply chain. Maybe one day we'll get there, but we're certainly not there right now. And again, Apple is actually the best example of a company that has shown that full integration is key. Now, I just want to give one fundamental example of why that's so important. So, for example, when I did the computer architecture course, Onur Mutlu spoke about this, and I think he didn't talk about Apple specifically, but he tried to explain why Apple is so successful with the iPhone. And one simple reason is because Apple has the luxury to design their chips and their software and their applications in an integrated way, and therefore, for example, do much better job with memory and the fetching of data and all that stuff, which is some of the biggest part of energy usage within a modern smartphone. And if you know what kind of applications you will write on top of your chip, so let's say if you know your iOS in this case, so the operating software, if you know what kind of software you're going to write, you can design the chip in a way that is optimal for that part of software. In other words, you can maybe do a much more efficient way of fetching memory. You can put certain parts of memory closer to the core and so on and so forth. And those are the kinds of things that you can do when you're fully integrated. So I think this is a nice example of why full integration is key. And that's why we believe Tesla will have a much, much bigger advantage being fully integrated for many years to come. And this gets me back to Peter Thiel and his fundamental thesis, which is create a monopoly. That's the only way to create wealth. And you create a monopoly in a legal way only by innovation. I want to add our thesis to this, which is now proprietary to Orange Capital Partners, which is the natural Sharpe ratio. In other words, you want to be able to iterate as much as you can. You want to lower your cost of making errors in two ways. One is you want to make sure the errors are not killing you. So the more errors you make, the better in terms of iteration, but you don't want those errors to be costly. And then you want to have the cost of error correction to be as low as possible. So this is kind of the way you want to develop a company and build a company that has the potential to create new industries and generate a lot of wealth. Because without iteration, you will not be able to do new things. Iteration is just another word for going into uncharted waters. That's what iteration really is. And most companies in the world don't do that because it's very difficult. Humans don't like to do iteration. Humans like to be right. Humans like to be safe. Humans like to have a backup. Humans like to know when they're wrong and all that stuff. And when you iterate, you don't. You try to minimize the errors. So you try to be right as many times as you can. But by iterating, you're already accepting the fact that you're going to be wrong. That's the key. I mean, if you iterate in a way that you're never wrong, that means you're not iterating. You're just doing the same thing again and again. I think Tesla actually is not even the best example. SpaceX is even a better example with the rockets blowing up in Boca Chica every now and then. Tesla is showing how serious they take this concept of iteration. So to get back now to Peter Thiel and the conversation in this particular episode, we want to get back to basics and understand why we're invested in Tesla. We're invested in Tesla because we believe Tesla is on the cusp of creating a massive monopoly in electric luxury intelligent cars. We believe that Tesla will be able to get a big share of that market for their shareholders. Certainly not as much as they probably deserve because of political pressure, because of also Elon Musk having second thoughts on being this profitable. So there's going to be a lot of factors that will hurt us. But one thing that's not going to hurt us is the competition. So I think Thiel has to rethink his thesis, and we have to build on his thesis and sort of renew it a little bit, which is that, yes, you want to have a monopoly, but you also need to understand that society is not going to tolerate you going to disrupt this massive physical market. The same is happening a little bit with Amazon, but it's certainly happening with Tesla. We see it already. I mean, the way President Biden is backlashing on Tesla, the unions are backlashing on Tesla, all these lawsuits he's getting and all that kind of stuff. It's all just a reaction of the establishment, in particular of the car industry establishment, against this massive threat of a monopoly, basically a car company. We're going to have one. Right now, we only have one car company. In fact, right now, as we speak, there's only one car company that is relevant, and that is Tesla. And nothing else matters. Everything else is just footnotes, dying businesses, a little bit sort of decoration, actually making it easier for Tesla to become a monopoly on the global scale, because there are these other so-called competitors that somehow may give the regulators and everybody the impression that there is alternatives when in fact there aren't alternatives. This is where we stand right now. We believe that the end game will be very similar because this is also, let's say, Glenn Shotwell recently at the Stanford Business School spoke about the way she thinks about SpaceX, and SpaceX thinks all SpaceX does, according to Shotwell, is think about production. How can we produce a lot of Starships? How can we produce a lot of Starlink satellites, a lot of Starlink launch vehicles, all that stuff? So every Elon Musk company, particularly the two big ones, SpaceX and Tesla, is geared towards production, manufacturing. Build the machine that builds the machine. And that is the actual key that makes you a monopoly. Because this is how you build the innovation stack, which is the other part of our principal stack by Jim McKelvey here. Innovation Stack, a book that we use for our innovation stack, for our principal stack. And Thiel doesn't talk about this because Thiel precedes Jim McKelvey's book. But I think it's still very relevant because what Thiel's saying is the same thing that Jim McKelvey is saying. He's saying that by creating by innovating rapidly, iterating rapidly, and solving problems, and through the solution of problems, creating new problems, solving those problems, you're creating an innovation stack, and you're making it impossible for somebody else to compete. That's how you create a legal monopoly, and that's how you generate wealth. Now, we at Orange Capital Partners believe that you will have a backlash, political backlash will be there, so you have to sort of maybe scratch the why a little bit. In other words, we believe that the X of Tesla is in the many multi-trillions. The Y is in the very high double. I mean, we're talking 50, 70, 80%. So Tesla is able to capture most of the value, but then they'll have to give up some of it because of political backlash, because of the massive disruption that they're taking, and also because Musk probably as an owner and largest shareholder will feel almost, there's a certain amount of wealth a single person can take without going crazy. And I think therefore he will have to reduce that. But even if that number is, let's say, somewhere between a Microsoft and a Google, given the size of the market that Tesla is creating. So I'm not talking about the existing market. I'm talking about the new market that Tesla is going to create, which is luxury intelligent electric cars. Or another way to say it is what Tesla is creating is a decarbonized transportation industry with intelligent software-defined transportation vehicles that today we call them cars. We might call them something else in the future, robots or who knows. And that market is massive because luxury transportation is something that everybody wants. Everybody wants to go from A to B, and everybody wants to do that in a convenient, low-cost fashion. And that's exactly what Tesla is providing. The fact that it's decarbonized is, even though that's part of the mission of Tesla, I would say it's almost just the icing on the cake. And because we have this terrible situation right now in the global situation with Russia and the Ukraine and the aggression there by Russia and the cutoff of Russia of the global markets, we have this immense need for the world to be decarbonized, or in other words, de-Russianized. And because Russia and carbon is almost the same, it's the same thing. So de-Russianizing the world economy, who's got the best solution there? It's Tesla. And the more we drive with a Tesla, the more we use solar, the more we use full self-driving, the better it gets, the cheaper it gets. And the higher the value it is, the higher the value that Tesla is able to provide, and therefore also the higher the value Tesla is able to capture. This is the flywheel here. This is the fundamental regenerative growth that Tesla is able to produce. And that's why we believe that Thiel is so key to our thesis, because his conceptual framework fits very well into Tesla. Thank you.